Okay, good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to City Hall and Council Chambers. Today we are holding a, well, let's do the roll call first. Go ahead, Rebecca.
So Mayor Paulette Guajardo.
Present.
Councilmember Roland Barrera.
Here.
Can we see Mr. Barrera, please?
Here.
I hear you, I just can't see you. Hold on just a minute. Hopefully,
All right.
hopefully we'll see you in a second.
I can see me.
There you are. All right, thank you. Okay, Sylvia Campos. Here. Gil Hernandez.
Here.
Michael Hunter.
Here.
Jim Klein.
Here.
Mike Pesley.
Here.
Everett Roy.
Here.
Dan Suckley.
Here.
City Manager Peter Zanoni.
Present.
City Attorney Miles Risley.
Here.
Mayor and Council, a quorum of the Council and the required charter officers are present to conduct the meeting.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Huerta. So again, thank you for joining us today. We are first going to discuss the sales tax reauthorization, the consideration of the sales tax reauthorization. And so with that, I think, Peter, do you have a few words?
I do, yes, ma'am. Thank you. So we do have two items.
Mayor, we have public comment also. Did you?
Okay, yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me just continue here, and then we'll turn it over to the public comment. So, Mayor and Council, we do have two items, and we're going to begin with the sales tax reauthorization item, and then we'll go into the bond program item. So today's goal on the agenda is to approve the two sales tax programs that we have been working on, and so today would be a confirmation of this is what we're going to move forward with, and the two 1/8 cent sales tax confirmations. We won't be voting on ballot language or actually calling the election. That'll be at the next council meeting. So today is just approving the two programs for the two 1/8 cents. And then for the bond program, similarly, it will be just approving the list of projects and the total value of the proposed bond program, which is $175 million. And then the next council meeting is when you would actually call the election and approve ballot language. Heather in her presentation does have ballot language. It's just a sample, so we can show you and begin the dialogue. Our bond counsel is here with us this morning, and they help us write that language. And so Stephanie Leiby is here with us, and she's the one that's helped us for many years on these things. And so she'll be here as well as a resource if you have any questions. But again, today is just approving the actual programs and projects. And we'll begin with Heather, but we'll do that right after citizen comment.
Okay.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Rebecca, do we have public comment?
Yes, ma'am. We do have two individuals signed up.
Okay.
Okay, so the first person is David Loeb.
David Loeb, 4771 Ocean. I think I said most of what I needed to or wanted to say on Tuesday. I just wanted to add on the survey you guys have. I want to encourage you to look at the question that asked about what people's priorities are. And if you kind of want a percentage sense, if you take those aggregate numbers and divide them by 200, that gets your percentage. So one that's around 1,000, that's about a 50%, of the people who took the survey approval. One that's 400, that's about 20%. As I've told you privately, I sent you our polling information that was a statistical model where we did random sampling. That showed that streets and storm protection / drainage were the only two items that were in our poll that were over 50%. There's two questions in there where people got a page of information and then asked to, say, yeah, are you for or against this project? And I want to caution you on those two questions because, as you know, elections are about delivering a message, and you all know from your own campaigns that you can't get a page of material into the minds of every person who walks into a voting booth. Doing that, replicating that in a real-life environment in a community our size in a November election is a $5 to $10 million campaign that started 6 months ago. And we don't have the kind of time for that as a community. The layman response to some of the proposals I've heard is, it's not a page long. It's there they go again. And so, I'm of the faction of people that really wants something that is good for the community to pass. And so I just want to encourage you yet again to go with what the public has told us in several formats is what they will vote for, which is streets and storm protection. And I hope to be your partner in getting that passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Loeb. Ms. Worth, I'm sorry, I didn't see the list here in front.
Okay.
So the second is Mr. Al Ariola?
No, ma'am, it's Johnny Filippello. It's Johnny Filippello.
Johnny Filippello, I'm sorry. I thought, Al, you didn't have...
I sent a letter to y'all.
Okay.
All right. Good morning, Mayor, Council. Johnny Filippello, President and CEO of the Buccaneer Commission. And on behalf of our 125 members, I stand before you to request a renewal or reauthorization of the 1/8 cents sales tax for the arena to include the entire complex and the museums in the C District area surrounding. This tax was authorized 20 years ago, and what a success story it's been. Number one, it built us the arena, but the millions of memories that citizens of this community have had at that venue are countless. Thousands of graduations have occurred. Everybody can remember their favorite concert they went to at the American Bank Center. The sporting events, Ice Rays hockey, A&M Corpus Christi basketball, the rodeo are all great life memories people have experienced. Let's not forget wrestling, Disney on Ice, all of these different things that have occurred. The great thing about that 8-cent tax is it funded all of those things, and it's done so well there's extra money available in the future. So reauthorization of that can not only fix an aging arena, can fix an aging convention center, a very aging Selena Auditorium, but we're not done there. It can also fix all the museums in that area, in the Harbor Playhouse. Don't overreach and try to do too much with this tax. Take care of the infrastructure that all of our citizens enjoy in downtown Corpus Christi. 1 million people go there every year. 700,000 of those are local citizens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Filippello. I think that concludes our public comment. So we will go ahead and move on to our business of today. Heather.
Good morning, Heather Hurlbert, Assistant City Manager. So we'll be talking about the reauthorization of the 2 1/8 cents that's currently authorized under the Type A. So just to recap, we have local sales tax. So the state authorizes up to 8.25 cents in sales tax can be collected. Of that, 2 cents is authorized to be collected on a local level for uses as prescribed by the state statute. So currently, 1 cent of those 2 cents goes to the city for city operations. That goes into the general fund, and that sales tax currently does not have an expiration date. The additional, then there is the other cent. Half of that cent goes to the RTA for their operations. And then the final portion of that is divided 4 ways. There are 2 authorizations under Type A, which one was for the construction of the arena. The second was for improvements to the downtown seawall. And those are the 2 that are expiring that we'll be talking about today. In addition to that, there is the Type B sales tax, which was reauthorized back in 2016 and went into effect in 2018, expires in 2023. And then finally, the crime control district, which that's additional 1/8 cents, that does expire in March of 2028. So we do have our sales tax that's spread amongst multiple different purposes across and been invested back into the city. So as I mentioned, the 2 Type A sales taxes are expiring. And so the one for the arena expires in September of 2025. And so we have to look and critically at what time we have to reauthorize this. So if for whatever reason the voters do not approve the sales tax project that is being brought forward in November, we would be able to bring this back in May of 25 prior to its expiration. The Type A sales taxes for the improvements to the downtown seawall expires in March of '26, so there is an additional opportunity in addition to May 25. This could be brought forward in November of '25 for reconsideration prior to the expiration. So there were a lot of questions about the term. The sales tax can be authorized for a term, either a defined term or with no expiration date. This is just a representation of the estimated revenues that could be pre-produced by 1/8 cents over different terms. So we included a 10-year term, a 15-year term, a 20-year term, and a 25-year term. So there are advantages and disadvantages of longer versus shorter terms. With the shorter terms, you would primarily be dependent on cash funding projects, and so as that sales tax is paid in on a monthly basis, that would build those funds and be able to pay for those projects. Going into a 15-year term, you would be able to do not only cash, but probably you could also do some shorter term bonds. At a 20-year term, also cash, and then less than 20-year bonds unless we were to issue bonds the very first day that that sales tax is being collected. And then on a 25-year term, you're able to possibly issue that debt over the first 5 years for those projects. Also, if you issue before that fifth-year timeline, you're able to have some additional collections on the back end to be able to do additional projects that may be available over and above what the debt service is. So these projections were based off a very conservative 1% increase on an annual basis, and it is not adjusted for the time value of money. This is just strictly a cash flow.
And Heather, we're recommending the 20-year term?
Yes, so right now we are recommending a 20-year term that would allow for development of the projects, and then we could issue, if the council chooses to do a shorter term than 20 years for bonding. So just a refresh on the allowable uses of Type A and Type B. Type A and Type B sales tax, that comes from the statute, the 4A, 4B statute, that lays out what these funds can be used for. These are just a high level. Really, the legislation, the statutes have changed, and so really you can use Type A and Type B projects kind of somewhat interchangeably. There's a different process to authorize those projects, and then the ballot language is slightly different, and the fact that Type A primarily would focus on a specific project, whereas Type B would focus on a specific purpose. So we'll deal first with the 1/8 cents that's currently authorized for the arena. And so we do have multiple proposals here. We talked a little bit about this during the public hearing on Tuesday. And this does include some sample ballot language that could see what this would look like on the ballot. These ballot language can be expanded. They can also be contracted. So there's a lot of options there. So the first proposal is to what we've been calling our baseline, which is utilizing the sales tax for the American Bank Center complex as a whole, which would include the Convention Center, the Salina Auditorium, and the arena. But then also allocating funding for continued improvements and upkeep to the other city-owned facilities within the C District, which would include the 3 museums, which are the Art Museum, the Science and History Museum, and the Asian Culture Museum, along with the Harbor Playhouse and the Water Gardens. These all are in a close proximity and do work together. In Buck Days, they did a great thing with pulling the museums in as part of the entrance into Buck Days, and so they do work together along with the Convention Center. This is a proposed ballot language that would have a defined term, would have the specific projects listed within their specific facilities listed. So then the proposed project 1B would include all those projects that are in 1A, but then would also add commercial and industrial streets. Now, because this would be for 2 different purposes, we recommend that this would be authorized under the Type B statute, and we still have the board in place, but this would allow for 2 uses under that. This ballot language is written to allocate 50% of the funding to commercial and industrial streets and 50% of the funding to those assets that were listed in the 1A, which would include the American Bank Center, the museums, the Water Garden, and the Harbor Playhouse. Proposal 1C would include everything from 1B, but then would also consider the infrastructure and support of military, which is another item that had been discussed. This sample ballot language would allocate the funding basically a third, with 33% going to commercial industrial streets, 33% going to military, and 34% or the remainder going to those C district assets. Those percentages can be changed in the term, or we could be more specific or less specific on that. And the proposed project 1D would include all those proposed project in 1A along with the commercial industrial street, or would include into commercial industrial streets. But what we would do is identify between $32 and $36 million in commercial industrial street projects that are included in Bond 2024. We would shift the funding for those projects over to the sales tax and then replace those projects with $32 to $35 million in residential or neighborhood street projects. I know that there's been a lot of talk about the streets, commercial versus neighborhood. With this proposal, we could accomplish the funding for neighborhood projects, along with moving forward with additional funding for commercial and industrial streets over the term of this reauthorization. We would go ahead and prioritize those projects that we identified, finish those projects, and then move forward within our master plan for those commercial and industrial projects, bringing those forward to the Type B board and ultimately the City Council for consideration on an annual basis. And so looking through the current bond, Bond 2024, this is the $35 million in projects that were identified. That does include the Lower Broadway project for $10 million, the Yorktown, design of the Yorktown project for $4 million, the design and construction for Alameda for a total of $20.5 million, and then construction on Sam Rankin of $500,000. These all do total the $35 million. And like I mentioned before, the intention would be to fully fund these projects, move forward with construction. Anything that's in design would have priority for the next round of funding for construction. Once those projects are done, continue bringing forward those projects on an annual basis for consideration and funding through the Type B streets allocation, and then utilizing more of the bond capacity for neighborhood projects. So then the final proposal would be reauthorizing the full 1/8 cents under the Chapter 327. This is a shorter term project, as the maximum authorization for this would be 4 years. We anticipate that this would produce between the $32 and the $35 million projects. This funding could be utilized for existing city-owned streets, which could be residential, neighborhood, or commercial industrial. It does not define what type of street. It just needs to be existing at the time of the election. This would be, like I said, over a 4-year period, and so this would be a pay-go, just like all of our other sales taxes. It would be paid to the city on a monthly basis. This would be a special revenue for the city, and so it would not be under the purview of another board. This would be under the purview of City Council. Then moving into the proposed project number 2, and so this would be the reauthorization of the sales tax that is currently being used for the seawall improvements. The proposal would be to continue the use for the downtown seawall flood control structures, and this would include the maintenance and improvements to the entire seawall structure, and also would include the breakwater, the salt flat levees, T&L head land masses, the marina basin, and flood control pumps that protect the city's downtown businesses. This would exclude any type of vertical structures or amenities that do not support the flood control or pertain to flood control. So it would not necessarily be authorized for vertical buildings, other amenities within the marina, but would focus primarily on the flood control function of the seawall and those other assets that are all included in that flood control structure. And in addition, would add citywide stormwater, flood control, drainage, and coastal resiliency projects, which will help expand or create new business opportunities across the city and protect those businesses that are existing. With us being a coastal city, we do have a lot of very flat areas that do flood on a regular basis, not only through tidal flooding, but rain flooding, and these projects have been identified to either protect or activate areas across the city. So this is two separate ballot languages. One is a more abbreviated ballot language. The second is a more expanded ballot language, which would specifically list those projects that are being proposed. And then looking at those capital projects, they do range across the city. We've identified 7 different projects based off of our stormwater master plan and also known issues that we have across the city. And so those would include projects all the way from Calallen, which is FDM 624, moving down through Turkey Creek, the Clarkwood Ditch and Oso tributary, the North Beach linear canal phase 2 and other coastal resiliency and flood control projects that may be needed on North Beach, the Corpus Christi Bay erosion mitigation, which we're seeing that along our whole shoreline, which could include down into the Naval Air Station, Williams Ditch, and then Oso Creek. And so all of these affect multiple areas across the city. And this is just a more detailed rendering of where those projects are and what they do include. And so moving into the survey results, the Economic Development Department did provide a survey opportunity for citizens. The survey was open for a little over 2 weeks. There was 10 questions total, with 7 being multiple choice, 1 residency question, and then 2 open-ended questions to allow for written responses. We did have a total of 2,200 respondents, and of those respondents, 93 indicated that they were citizens of Corpus Christi. We did have a pretty equal, a good distribution amongst the 5 districts, along with respondents from Portland and then others that are outside the city limits. So we did ask a prioritization question on if, how the sales tax could be utilized. Street improvements, crime control, flood prevention, military support, and park improvements and amenities were actually the top 3 were the street improvements, crime control, and the flood protection improvements. And then from there, it was it tapered down to include city operations, street improvements in commercial areas, and the American Bank Center improvements. When asked, would the respondents support the proposed Project 1, which included the C District amenities, 60% said that yes, they would, 40% said no, they would not. And then looking at the question on how many people have been to the different locations within the C District, out of that, 84% of respondents had visited the American Bank Center in the last year. 53% had visited the Art Museum of South Texas. 45% had been to the Science and History Museum. 33% had been to Harbor Playhouse. 22% have been to the Asian Cultures Museum, and 47% have visited the water gardens within the last year. And so one of the things that we have discussed previously is that while the American Bank Center is used for conventions, it is also used by our residents very heavily, with 60 to 70% of the use being done by those residents. Looking at the assets and how they would be ranked by the respondents, the American Bank Center was the top respondent, then the Museum of Science and History, then the Art Museum, the Water Garden, the Harbor Playhouse, and then last, the Asian Cultures Museum. So when respondents were asked whether they support the proposed project number 2, which is the coastal resiliency, flood controls, downtown seawall, 86% said yes, 14% said no, they would not support that. And then out of that, it was pretty evenly split between the seawall protection and the citywide projects. So recommendation is that, I guess before we go to the recommendation, are there any questions?
Yes. Councilman Suckley. I'm sorry, Pusley.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So going back to the marina, and I'm talking specifically about the seawall, which is on page 12, the 1/8 cents for that.
Yes.
So we could list this as a type B sales tax in the language that goes on the ballot itself, correct?
We can authorize either one of these under type A or type
Type
B.
B.
So yes, we could authorize this under type B also.
Okay. And if we do that, then we wouldn't necessarily need to list the specific stormwater projects, unless we wanted to.
Unless you wanted to. You could also do that under type A. You don't have to list those specific projects, just listing. So basically your project would be drainage and coastal resiliency, stormwater, which would include the downtown seawall and then other projects across the
Well, I'm
city.
just thinking in terms of how we keep the ballot language
Sure.
as simple as possible.
Yes, you could keep it very simple.
You start listing all those projects and
Yes.
it gets confusing for people. And so your top, whether you do it as type A or type B, and I lean toward doing type B because it does give council more flexibility in how
Yes.
they do these projects.
Yes.
But I think it's important to include the citywide stormwater control because I doubt in our lifetime we'll ever see a countywide drainage district created. We tried that once and people were breaking out tar and feathers. Okay, and then going back to the marina part of this, so what type of projects would be included or would they not be included for the marina specific? So if we wanted to build more boat slips, is that part of this or not?
So the way it's written now, no, that would not be included. It is an eligible use. You could utilize that for that because it is part of the marina structure. But the way that this is written right now, it would limit it to those things that are primarily for flood control or part of that seawall flood.
It would have to be seawall or the breakwater, something along those lines to be eligible.
Exactly. Bulkheading on the T and the L heads, dredging within the marina basin to maintain the depth that's needed, expanding the breakwater, repairing the breakwater, repairing anything or maintaining anything or improving anything that is related to that flood control system.
Okay. Okay.
And the Municipal Marina Advisory Board are more comfortable with that. Instead of nothing for the marina, they feel confident that at least the system, like the bulkheading, the land masses, the dredging, that would all be eligible. And so they're more at ease, if you will.
Yes.
They were worried that if nothing was allocated to the marina,
Right.
it would be a problem. But this
Yeah.
is a good compromise for them, which is that the major systems, so the depth of the water, the bulkheading, the land masses, all those could be addressed with the sales tax, and then we could find other funds for slips, lighting, that type of thing.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, okay. And then, all right, now I want to shift gears just a second and go back to the proposal for, let's see, let me get back here. The proposed 1D, 1/8 cent sales tax. So besides, this basically is a compromise in allocating money for both the ABC Center complex is what I like to call it,
Yes.
and streets,
Yes.
commercial streets, because
Yes.
we can't do residential streets under this
We cannot.
unless you do the 327.
Yes.
And so if I did the math correctly, or let me ask it this way. What additional funds, and maybe you or Peter one can answer this, would we be able to allocate to help with the ABC Center? Can we allocate part of hotel motel tax and the state hotel motel tax for help with the ABC Center complex?
So yes, so out of the 9% hotel occupancy tax that's currently collected by the city, 2% of that, or 2 cents of that, is specifically for Convention Center or the American Bank Center. So we do utilize a portion of that funding currently to help with those maintenance, to help with any type of operational shortfalls, and help with the management contract. And that automatically, so that's about $4.7 million that is currently going to the American Bank Center complex.
Per year.
Per year.
Okay.
In addition, there is additional capacity within the 7 cents that we are continuing to allocate a portion of that to continue with the capital improvements there.
Okay.
So we would not have any additional funding over and above what currently is there unless, unless our hotel occupancy tax grows. But we are able to utilize that to continue investing back in the American Bank Center.
Okay, so 7 million on the one hand, and how much of the 7?
Not 7, so it's 7% and 2%.
I know.
So out of the 2% is 4.7 million.
Okay,
That's what the current collection, I think it dropped to 4.3 for fiscal year '25.
okay,
And then we have several million that can be utilized from the 7%, because that does go, 44% of that 7% goes to Visit Corpus Christi for the continuing marketing of the city, and the operation of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And then we do have money that is given to different attractions across the city to help supplement their marketing budgets, along with maintenance for the
so the
downtown area.
7% is already spent. We're already giving that to other things because I don't want to rob from what we're doing.
Exactly. We do have a limitation. There's maybe a couple of million that we can utilize out of that 7%,
Okay.
but the majority of it is being allocated. So yes, it'd be some funding choices
So we
there.
could possibly get another 2 million out of that 7%.
Yes.
Okay. And then what about the state hotel motel tax?
So we would be able to, we still have the ability to authorize the PFZ
Right.
to be able to do that. And so that is something that we can authorize. Now, that would be not an immediate funding source because it would need to build, we'd set that base year. And just like in a TERS, you'd have to build that increment. So it's not $1 from day one. And we'll have more funding on the back end than we would on the front end.
Okay, but do we have an estimate of how much that would be?
We do not. We haven't rerun those numbers without expanding the convention center. We still are rerunning those numbers to see without the expansion what that would produce. I believe originally it was about almost 200 million over a 30-year period with the expansion of the American Bank Center, but with us removing the expansion option right now, or not considering the expansion option right now, that will reduce since we won't have the traffic.
Okay.
But we would still get additional state tax money that we would only get if the convention center project is on, if it's on and if it's approved. So the project finance zone is only for the convention center, and the next step would be to define the project, and the project could be as simple as renovating the American Bank Center.
Okay.
Once council declares that, then we would be eligible for that increment and state hotel tax. So we would basically, with our local taxes, be leveraging state monies.
But that language needs to be approved in this sales tax first.
No.
No, the city council, you're right, it does not have to be in the language.
Okay.
The state law requires city council declare a project
Okay.
by December, I think, the end of this year.
Yeah, we would intend to do it by the end of this year to go
Right.
ahead and set the base year as 2023, 24.
Right, but it's important to point out, because at issue is if you did something else like a 327, just streets only, then we would lose that ability to get free state money from the hot tax.
From the hot tax.
Yeah, so it's a good leverage matched opportunity.
Yeah.
Our local dollars leverage state monies. There's only a few cities in the state that are eligible for this. It was a legislative action that was approved by the legislature and the governor.
Yeah, I talked to one of my legislative buddies, and he said, we think we let this one slip out the door, and we're not going to do that again. So
Exactly.
we probably got lucky.
Right.
So at a minimum, we'd be looking at $6 to $7 million roughly that we could allocate toward the ABC Center complex on a per year basis, not including the state hotel motel tax or the state funds.
Correct. And just to clarify, that is actually already being allocated to the American Bank Center, so this is not, we would not get a higher level. This is money that's already being allocated right now.
Okay, say that again.
So right now, we're currently utilizing that money right now for some of these projects that we're doing at the American Bank Center. This would not be new funding. We already have that included in the budget, and that's part of what we're reinvesting right now back into the American Bank Center. We would not have a higher level of funding if we utilize only the hotel occupancy tax.
No, I realize that, but I'm talking
Okay.
about the sales tax and the hotel motel
Yes,
tax.
yes, so we coupled
That
it together,
would
yes.
would give you an elevated level of funding that you
Yes.
don't have today.
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
So, and then just also to put it in context, so we've shared with council over the months here the estimated cost just for deferred maintenance, just to keep the roof from leaking, the chillers working. So just for the Arena Convention Center in Salina, it's about $100 million, with inflationary costs. And this is not for any expansion or renovation per se. This is just to keep the roof on, the mechanical plumbing and other equipment back where it should be. So 10 million may sound like a lot, but when you have 100 million in need, just for basics, just to keep the roof from leaking, keeping the building cool, that's after decades of neglect, we gotta get it caught back up.
But would that $10 million allocation allow us the ability to maybe do a bond of some type
Right.
to take bigger projects on?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially since this project, we already have a really good handle on. We've had the study done, we've got the prioritization of it. And so it is something that if we want to do 15 or 20-year bonds, we get issued from day one, basically, and get moving with that project sooner than later.
And I guess for me, the big deal here on the 1D option is the fact that it's a compromise between, I prefer doing the original one, which is just all of it goes to the ABC Center, which I've championed since I got here 4 years ago. But I think this is a compromise based on the information we received back from the public, in that we are going to allocate money for maintenance and upkeep, which this council, before I ever got here, gets highly criticized for not taking care of the infrastructure that we build and put in place. And this gives us an opportunity to do that, and at the same time, we can put some commercial streets in here, and so you've got a good balance of the two. So with this and what we're going to do on the 2024 bond, we also can have streets in that as well. Mm-hmm. So we get double whammy for our money.
Right. Yeah, Councilman Pusley, that's well said. So this is it's a great compromise. We know that this city council and the mayor have streets as the top priority,
right,
and have been advocating for it. So another way of looking at this is today, $8 million is dedicated to one facility. That's the arena. With this compromise, a total of 8 facilities, would be funded only with half that amount, with
right.
$4 million. So today, one is for $8 million, but when you consider the entire complex and the 5 assets behind it, that's a total of 8 facilities that would have half the amount of funding, and that's so that we can place $4 million plus on the number one priority for the council, which is streets. So it's a good compromise. It still does provide some to the American Bank Center for critical infrastructure needs, but more importantly, it dedicates $4 to $5 million every year to your number one priority, which is streets.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And the other thing to consider too is not only would you have the streets money on this authorization, but there's additional streets money on the authorization that was done in 2016. So those coupled together would, as in today's dollars, would produce about $8.5 million a year for investment in commercial and industrial street projects.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? I came here today to try to help us not have to spend 4 hours discussing this. So, Mayor, I'm going to make a motion that we adopt the proposed project number 1D, and hopefully I can get a second, and then we can move on with further discussion.
I'll make a second. I'd second that.
We have a motion in 2 seconds, and, we're going to continue. Thank you, Councilman Barrera. We got you in. We're going to go ahead and continue the discussion, but there is a motion and a second on the floor, and we've got lots of lights turned on.
Yes.
So, Councilman Pusley, you done?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Councilman Suckley.
Thanks, Mayor. A lot of the things Councilman Pusley said, I'm in agreement with, and some of the same concerns. A few questions I had with respect to the wording, Heather. We keep talking about industrial and commercial, Is there any way for us to change that to talk about arterial and collectors, which may
believe
be
so.
more palatable to our community?
I think so. Yeah, we can.
Okay. Because obviously it's
Or
about
compromise.
residential.
Yes.
But again, if we're going to carve that out, then we ought to maybe stay away from the industrial commercial
Sure.
designation. So, on the flood control and coastal resiliency, I brought this up a couple months ago that there's still no projects identified for Flower Bluff or Padre Island. That's going to be a problem probably for the taxpayers is, what's in it for me? So with that being said, as an alternative, I like the compromise of the 1D option, but is there also an opportunity for us to carve out some street dollars out of that $200 and some million that we would commit to that flood and coastal resiliency? Could we do 75% for that and 25% more for additional arterial and collector? So that way we would get, even a larger impact, and we can consider carving back or cutting back 1D to 75 and 25, and you still get to the point of getting more money for the American Bank Center and the C District is getting the same amount of dollars for the streets. So
that is definitely something that can be considered. It would, just like the other proposal, it would need to be authorized under Type B instead of Type A. And so we could reauthorize it under Type B, and if that is the will of council, we can definitely include additional uses within that proposition.
And that again helps the people in District 4 that only see the one OSO project that doesn't help Flower Bluff or Padre Island to maybe help support it.
And just something to support out to, just to point out too, while these are the projects that have been identified, we feel like that there would be additional capacity for other projects. And so while we haven't identified one specifically for possibly within Flower Bluff or on the island, that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be projects done, but it's just not specifically identified yet.
Well, I would caution us to, if we're going to use this as part of our tools that we're going out and for community engagement, that we consider changing that or including some things that are truly on Padre Island and Flower Bluff identified for. I had a question about the PFC. You already discussed that and the fact that we may be seeing that back in the next 4 months or so to talk about setting a base year.
Yes.
And then lastly is regarding the American Bank Center specifically is if for whatever reason we choose to not allocate significant dollars to that project, do we feel like that hurts the ability to negotiate with a new naming rights partner? And I know Danny's here, but certainly someone that's willing to pony up a bunch of money to put their name on it is going to want to make sure they have a first class facility. So
Right, yeah. So the OVG is in charge of the naming rights process via the contract that we have with them, and they have a lot of good leads, even without any commitment for additional funds to the center. So I don't think I think the 50-50 under the first 1/8 cent would only enhance their opportunities to getting a strong naming rights partner. I think we're in real good shape, and council's potential action today would only enhance that, make it even better. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Heather.
Sure.
Councilman Hunter.
Thank you, Mayor. So clarity for Proposition 2 for the seawall. Are those projects in priority order?
So they are not in priority order, no.
Double checking for clarity.
Yes.
Arena goes unfunded with the sales tax, let's just say. How is it going to go funded?
So if the sales tax is not reauthorized to be able to use within the American Bank Center, so we would have to look to general fund dollars, GO bonds, CO bonds. We'd have to look to another funding source. If this one was not renewed and be able to be invested back in there, we'd be limited to just the hotel occupancy tax dollars that come in right now, which we know are not sufficient to be able to do some of these the bigger projects that we need to do.
Thank you. So there are other sources to fund it.
There are, but it'd be primarily taxpayer funded.
It would be another fun season of trying to get the arena funded.
Yes.
So next question, with that being said, how come all those other sources of funding can't be used to generate the state additional funding?
I think so. We could utilize, as long as the project is approved by the comptroller, and so, but we would need to have sufficient funding to show that we are doing some type of catalytic improvements or whatever. And so we would still be able to utilize that for the PFC, but it would have to be, we'd have to produce a project that the comptroller feels is catalytic and worthy, or qualifies, not worthy, is qualified to receive those PFC funds.
So we can,
Without
the sales tax.
We could without the sales tax. It'll make it more challenging, and we would have to allocate general fund dollars or taxpayer money to be reinvested back into that to create a large enough project to qualify for the PFC match.
You have to raise the tax rate to fund that?
Either the tax rate would have to be raised, or decisions would have to be made on what our bond program looks like to be able to create that capacity to issue those bonds to be able to do that.
You would not have to raise the tax rate to fund that. That is incorrect. That is absolutely incorrect.
Either or, yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. Now that I've been sidetracked, why didn't we use half a 16th 327 and a 16th American Bank Center?
So you cannot reauthorize by the comptroller's rules, statutes, you cannot reauthorize for anything less than 1/8 cents. So you can't break it down into a smaller amount than 1/8 cents.
You can't.
You cannot. And
Okay.
because 327 is one statute and American Bank Center would be under Type A and Type B, you couldn't reauthorize for those two different purposes under two different statutes for an amount less than 1/8 cents.
Good, thank you for the clarification.
Councilwoman Campos.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, can we go back to page 23? Let's look at that survey again. How would you prioritize the use of sales tax? And the three programs that the citizens have been asking for and are still asking for is street improvements, residential streets, crime control, flood protection, but yet that doesn't seem to be, a large part of this proposal, of this discussion. This 327 is sort of seen as an afterthought. It's sort of seen like, yeah, we did the survey, but you know what? We're not going to listen to you because there's not enough information. I mean, thank goodness that we do have some other city council members that have been asking really good questions about where we could get additional funding. But it doesn't make it clear in this. It's not until we are here raising those issues that we get answers from you, but it's not presented here. It's not presented because, for me, I feel that you've got an agenda. You've been given an agenda as to how to present this instead of giving us more options as to how we can accomplish the things that the citizens are asking for. So just to make it clear, the American Bank Center and the C District get hotel tax occupancy, and we tax, and it's not enough money, but yet we can borrow money, like the PCU, or what is it called, the
PFC.
The PFC, and so I've always thought that, and I support the arts. I mean, anybody that knows me knows that I support the arts. I mean, I think I've been more often to the Asian Museum, the last couple of months since my entire life, because they open up their doors and they make us feel, welcome. But going back to the use of this sales tax that we have an opportunity, the good thing is that it's only good for 4 years. I mean, so we can see how the program would work, and then we would have another option again in 4 years to say, you know what, it looks like, we're not able to, or the arena or the other properties, the other C District are not able to, fix the roofs, fix the chillers, repairs, fix, which I understand. We do need to fix those things, but we also need to make sure that we take care of our own citizens first. How are you going to, get to those places if we don't have money dedicated to those issues, to those residential streets and sidewalks? Believe me, the survey should be an eye-opener for all of us. I mean, we definitely need to look at this and see how we can approach this holistically. I think 4 years is a good test, is a good way to let the citizens know that we are looking and that we are listening. And I myself will only look at the 327. I don't know what the rest are going to do. I've not spoken to any of the city council members. I just thought that they would be listening to the survey. So with that, I guess I'll let the rest of the council members have their say.
Mayor, can I just add to that? So, Councilwoman Campos, the 327 would be a pay-as-you-go program with a maximum of that $8 to $9 million. The alternative proposal, which is known as 1D now, would generate $35 million in 1 year. So we could do $35 million, which is more than the total annual budget for street maintenance in 1 year if the bond program's approved, compared to taking 4 years to get that same result. So there's a much more immediate impact to the neighborhoods. That's one of the reasons this is an appealing one, because based on the survey, not only do residents want their neighborhood streets done, but they want them done like right now, not 4 years from now. So putting it in the bond program with the substitution provides immediate relief to residential neighborhood streets with an infusion, a doubling of what we're doing today, in the tune of $35 million out of the bond program. Right. And the alternative, if it was in 327, it would take 4 years to get that same result. So just to consider that as well.
Councilman Roy? Oh, well, you said you wanted to hear the councilman.
Well, I didn't expect a response.
I was just giving you some additional information.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do appreciate that, Peter. The other thing that let me just say this. We were given all this information, I guess, like 10 o'clock last night. Y'all were still working all this out. And so, it's unfair. It's unfair for us to be able to absorb all this. Because, I was looking at 8 o'clock, and you only had up to, 1C or whatever the proposal was. And then all of a sudden, I said, well, what happened to the streets? And then that's when you responded, that the 327 was going to now become an option. But I really don't appreciate all this being given to us at 10 o'clock at night after you all received the results of the surveys. You should be able to do a better job to explain and to give us enough time so that we can actually see. And like you just said, the $35 million that you're saying that we could get that money faster, right? You're saying that we...
Because it would be in the bond program.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Versus the $4 million?
4 million would be $8 million would be the annual sales tax collection. The 1/8 cent generates about $8 million today. Mm-hmm. And we've been working on this not only all day yesterday, but for, let's see, what is this, August, for 9 months.
Right.
Up to 10 o'clock at night for 9 months. So we continue to get information and utilize it and share it with the council. I think we'd be in a similar situation if you had 5 more weeks or 8 more months. There's a lot of data sharing. We've been commended by many leaders in the community for really engaging the community. And when you do that, you get a lot of ideas. And so that's what this is about. This is what nobody's trying to put something on an agenda here at the last minute. It's just a lot of good information, good ideas being shared by the entire community as well as the council members. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilman Roy.
I've got a couple questions. I do understand, or I see the compromise. I think streets are important. I know that in District 1, because of the large proportion of industrial commercial streets that I have, and I've worked with several large companies that have called and had major concerns because they couldn't get their trucks down the streets. They were having to do all kinds of creative things to try to continue to do business. And the question is always the same: how much money do you put aside for commercial or industrial streets? How do you guys, where do we fit in the scheme of things? Because they are taxpayers too, and they bring revenue into this community, and I've never had a good answer for them. But we've been able to do some of the things in terms of getting those streets repaired due to going and just continuing to bring that issue up to the city. And I can think of several, but we have some others to go. So I do like the idea. I warmed up to it, where we would have this option. The other thing is, I've talked to a lot of business owners in the downtown area. In District 1, downtown is our responsibility. And one of the things that I know for sure, whether a survey shows it or not, and I've heard this repetitively, is that when the American Bank Center has an event in place, I've heard this from hoteliers, I've heard it from small retail shops, I've heard it from restaurateurs, I have heard it from people that own little teeny stands or whatever, say when the American Bank Center, when we have events at the American Bank Center, when we have events in the downtown area, their business prospers by at least 30% on those days. That's a huge impact that the American Bank Center and that area has on our economy. So first and foremost, I have to really take a look at that, because it's important to try to keep the viability of those companies. I'm talking about the occupancy of their hotels. I'm talking about the number of meals that they prepare that day. It's definitely an increase. So that's an important concern, that we continue to protect that. And that's part of my decision-making process today. The other thing I want a clarification on, I'm asking you to put this in layman terms. When we talk about, we went out to the state, we got those funds, I believe that's what you're calling the PFC.
Yes.
First of all, for those of us out there that are listening, can you give what PFC stands for?
Project finance zone, sorry.
Okay.
Project finance zone.
And I'm trying to ask these clarifying questions really for the basis of everybody that's listening. And so what you're talking about is the monies that we basically went to the state, that we worked on, and we did receive. Now the difference is, because we've listened to the people and they do not want a hotel convention center in the downtown area. They made that very clear, and we've listened to them. That's going to affect the overall revenue that we're going to have access to. I'm trying to put this in layman terms.
Yes.
That we're going to have access to with those funds. And if I understand you right, that in order to have access to those funds, we have to have qualifying events that we're going to do. And so where I'm leading with this is the rehabbing of the American Bank Center or the museum or the Harbor Playhouse. I mean, I'm a big supporter of the Harbor Playhouse, but it needs some work. We definitely understand that it needs some work there. Is that conceptually, do you think those projects are going to be possible to use that money?
So it would only be able to use basically on the American Bank Center. So it is specifically for the
How about Celine Auditorium?
Because that operates as a whole, basically. I mean, we utilize that all to attract people. So it's a rebate of hotel occupancy tax. So the idea behind it is creating a facility that attracts people from out of town to come and use your facilities. And so, it was primarily for, we went and asked for it primarily for the renovation and expansion of the complex, which would be the American Bank, the Arena Auditorium, the Selena Auditorium, the Arena, and the Convention Center, since that's all used for convention space. And so it would not include the museums or the Harbor Playhouse, so we could utilize the sales tax for that, and limited hotel occupancy tax for those. But it's primarily would be focused on the American Bank Center complex, and we'd have to have basically a catalytic enough project. So going in and just doing.
Give me an example.
I'm sorry?
Give me an example of what you feel is a catalyst.
So I think what we're proposing right now is the investment of $100 million into upgrading the major facilities, to not necessarily expanding the footprint, but optimizing those the rooms and the facilities to be able to host a larger and additional conventions and bring more tourism into town. And so I think that if we style this correctly, even though we're not going to expand, we are specifically looking for optimization and revitalization, that the comptroller would allow that under the PFC statute. And then that would allow us to then have up to that 4% state hotel occupancy tax be rebated back to the city for those additional dollars that we create increasing in tourism.
Thank you. And then I want to clarify one other thing. I believe residential streets is important. If I understand, I want to put this in layman terms also, because I think there's a lot of people, as we discuss these things, we have, even though we may had information that was given to us at a certain time frame, we still have more information than the average individual out there that's listening. So if I understand, one of the things that, because residential streets is important to this council, one of the things that we are looking at, or I should say streets in general, but particularly residential, is that in this compromise, we can cover some relief for commercial streets, industrial streets, but by making sure that we put that $32 to $36 million in the bond, that we are also going to pass that, or suggest going to vote that $175 million, that we also take care of the residential street need. And the benefit to that, if I understand what Peter said, is that instead of waiting for 4 years, I guess, in terms of how we can allocate that, because it's on a cash basis, we have the ability to go out and continue to work on those streets now. And you can time me if you want. I don't mind. The other thing is, and this is really important, and I wish Ernie was here, because I think this is another thing that I've heard from city staff, and I think it's always important to get city staff's input. When you take a look, we've had tremendous success right now in terms of working on our streets by pulling our street maintenance in-house. We can do more, we can do it more efficient. We've made headway where before this council sat here 5-6 months ago and we talked about 60 years? 60 years as opposed to bringing it, I'm sorry? 64 years, but bringing it down to 11. When I've talked to Ernie in the past, I know this is a real, I say touchy subject, but and some of the other council members have brought up, where are we at in terms of in-house? Can we have another, Councilman Klein has brought this up, can we have another crew out there doing what they do? And he said, number one, we need the equipment, which is a cost, and we need to find the labor, which has been hard. So we're kind of maxed out right now in terms of our capacity, and we also use outside vendors. So my concern is that if we were to go out here and we load everything on, we're doing everything we can on residential streets now, and we overload this, then all of a sudden we're not going to be able to do it anyway, because there's a capacity in terms of our labor and what we're able to do. So we have to also be realistic. And I just want everybody to know that we're doing everything we can as fast as we can and as hard as we can. And I just want the street staff to be able to say that they agree with me, and if they don't, that's okay too. I'd like to have your input.
Yeah, where's the street staff?
Sir, Neiman Young, Assistant City Manager. I am in charge of the Public Works Department. In addition, I did bring senior leadership from the Public Works Department. The director for the Public Works Department is currently out taking care of a personal matter. But we definitely understand that you may have concerns regarding capacity, but we're confident, and you're absolutely correct. The needs in the city's community and infrastructure is definitely greater than the capacity that can be performed in-house with strictly Public Works Department crews alone. And you're absolutely correct. There are costs that's associated with increasing those crews within the Public Works Department. There's challenges with getting equipment and supply chain issues there. In addition, we do experience significant recruitment challenges with bringing in the talent that we need in order to fill those crews. However, I am happy to report the fact that we do rely on a strong partnership with our contracting community. And when we did have discussions with the contracting community, which are sustained engagements, they have actually stepped up to the plate, increased their presence, increased their capacities on their end in order for us to meet the needs of the community in addressing our infrastructure. And if the City Council decided that they did want to move forward with this option in the Type A sales tax, or I'm sorry, the Type B sales tax, to add more funding into the portfolio for the Public Works Department, we will be able to accommodate that increased workload either through our in-house crews or with our contracted community. Currently, we're at a point where we're moving so fast that we're not experiencing capacity issues. Actually, we're running into a funding issue where literally we're going to run out of money before the end of the year. We're going to have crews, going to have equipment, we're ready to go, but we're going to run out of money because we're moving so quickly in the rapid payment program. So if we can get more funding, if you all decide to move forward with the 1D, I'm confident that we'll be able to accommodate that increase in the workload.
That's great. So with that, one of the other caveats I want to talk about is that I spend a lot of time talking to people about patching potholes.
Yes, sir.
And right now, I look at the turnaround time that it's taking to patch up potholes.
Yes, sir.
So if we're at a point where, and it doesn't sound like we're standing around and doing nothing, but if you have some additional time, I hope that we could, especially with this recent rain and that, I hope that we could shorten the amount of time that it's taken to get those potholes refilled.
Yes, sir. And we actually had in our initial discussions on the budget yesterday that we're slowly moving out of the single pothole repair business. It's simply not a good model. We've all realized that it's a failing model, and that's why we're asking for the funding to actually move from doing potholes to actually doing skin patching, which is basically an overlay of a street that's riddled with multiple potholes. So
that's great, but at the end of the day, Neiman, when I pull out of my driveway and I drive down the street and I've got to replace tires and rims.
Yes, sir.
The bottom line is that people want results, and they want to know that they can drive on their streets without doing damage to their vehicles.
Yes, sir.
So whatever it's got to take to get that done, I'm all for it.
Yes, sir. That's a fair request of our citizens, and we're stepping up to that demand.
All right. Thank you.
Heather, so, the the Chapter 327, which is strictly residential streets.
No, it's city-owned streets.
Okay.
So any
City-owned.
city-owned, so that could be any type of, whether it's commercial, industrial, arterial, collector, residential.
Whatever we identify.
Exactly.
For that.
Exactly.
Revenue, or that route, path. So streets are priority, and we've said that before. I think we're all advocates of that. But in looking at this here, and it was just said, the funding is paramount. So in going with the Chapter 327, or even entertaining it, it's a very short-term fix. It's a 4-year, and that has to be renewed, correct, every 4 years?
Yes.
And that would garner 32 million?
Right now, on average,
Roughly.
between 32 to 36 million, it's between $8 and $9 million a year.
Versus locking this in on the flip side of that, let's say 20 years, and dedicating 50% garners 80 million?
Yeah, almost 100 million, yeah.
Almost 100 million?
Yeah. And And so yes, you could do a longer-term plan if you utilize the reauthorization of the sales tax. That gives you a 20-year term or 25-year term or whatever City Council choose to move forward with, that you can lock in a longer-term plan to accomplish those things.
Right, and we're securing guaranteed millions for streets.
Yes. And
Now,
like I said,
I realize that's not, and this is twofold, because the sales tax, you cannot, we need to emphasize that. You cannot include residential streets. We all want residential streets. That's,
Yes.
We know that. So you cannot include residential streets in the reauthorization of this sales tax vehicle.
that is correct.
But we can include arterials and collectors.
Yes.
If we allow the bond or give the bond more capacity by moving over 6 or 7 projects that total $32 to $36 million, then we go residential streets, 32 to 36 million, and that is guaranteed for the next 2 years. And we are now funding, and we just heard, funding is paramount to the increase in workload that can be handled.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Hernandez. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, Mayor, and I was just speaking with Neiman, and we know that at some point there's a break point. If you have too much money in a contractor's portfolio, or even ours, you can't complete it, and that's what Councilman Roy was getting at.
Right.
And we've seen it. We caution when we bring contracts to council, if a company has too much workload, we've seen it. In my 5 years here, and I've seen it in my 22 years in San Antonio, that there's a breaking point and they can't deliver. And sometimes companies fail and go bankrupt. So there's a fine line. So the staff's recommendation that we think $4 million of the sales tax is doable, allowing for more work on the bond program, but too much at one time is problematic and can result in not getting the work done at all. So just to point that out, there's a fine balance in contractors and even our own crews.
Right. Thank you. Councilman Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. This option 1D, I have to say that it was, one of those, it seemed like it was one of those backdoor deals that we just got privy to this, late last night with no time to vet or review it. And the biggest problem I have with all of what's been proposed, that there is no permanent funding in for residential streets with any of the proposals. Now, in looking at our budget policy, 4 cents of our property tax goes directly to residential streets, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is $10.8 million.
About, yeah.
Residential street, 1% of our general fund, which is right around $3 million. Is that $3 million of the entire general fund, including transfers, or just the revenues from sales tax?
I am not sure. I have to clarify that.
Okay, because that's a difference between $3.4 million and $2.9 million, right? So I want some clarification on that.
Sure.
And then,
Councilman, I have the clarification. It's of property tax, so it's 1% of the 1% of the property tax revenue.
okay, that's not what the budget says. The budget policy says 1% of the general fund.
Okay, I was talking about the 4 cents.
So the 4 cents is the property tax.
Right.
4 cents of the property tax directly for street, for residential streets, which is about $10.8 million.
Right.
1% of the general fund, which there's some question whether it's the general fund before transfers or not.
Yeah.
So I want a clarification
we'll get
on that.
Clarification.
And then 5% of the industrial district agreement, which is going to change with, if we have a new industrial district agreement, but currently it's about $1.4 million.
Increased slightly, yeah.
Right. And we supplemented it with $6 million from $6.1 million of the general fund from last year. This year, we're proposing to fund it with certificates of obligation, which is not a permanent solution for that $6 million. And so the whole thing about it is we want consistency on a year-to-year basis that's funded for residential streets and streets in general that is, pay as you go. Because all the options that we're talking about in terms of borrowing money, you have to pay that back. right? At some point, and just from this year in the general fund, we went from a debt service of $55 million to $70 million. So that's an additional $15 million that we're going to pay for debt service. The more you add to that, the more of that operational budget has to go to your debt service. So what I'm concerned about is that we're not earmarking or codifying a specific amount that will have reliability of year to year for residential streets that when we create the plan that we have funding for. None of this applies to that. All the kind of machinations. Now, the recommendation I had early on, which was from right after Proposition A failed, was for the stormwater mitigation toward the seawall goes to all stormwater. That was my very first suggestion to the city manager the week after Proposition A failed. The second one was to split up the arena fund into three sections. One for commercial streets, a third for commercial streets, a third for the convention center, and a third for the military infrastructure. The reason I suggested that is because I know our military is very popular here. It is our second largest employer in the city, and it has always been my understanding that Type B or Type A has always been to attract and retain primary jobs. Am I incorrect there?
That is one of the uses, yes.
That's one of the uses, right? Now, the definition of what economic development can be very fluid, to say the least. And there's obviously that great example in Hutto of that hippo statue that they used for economic development, which I'm not sure how that ever occurred, but it gives us a lot of leeway on what economic development is. So I will, like I said, I have not had enough time to vet the compromise, and that's why it's a little frustrating. And then kind of moving over, we could have done that anyway. We could reduce our amount of debt that we're going by moving those streets over to commercial streets, and then put the convention center on the ballot for a bond project. You could do it that way. There's, lots of ways to skin a cat, but if we're looking at, kind of putting our voters in a corner and say, hey, we're going to put residential streets on the bond. And they're like, well, absolutely. Okay. It's a shell game. Moving stuff here to there to try and make sure things good. But we're still putting it on the credit card. And I don't know if this is, at least the 327 is pay as you go, right? It's not putting more on the credit card. It's not trying to maximize that. It doesn't overextend our people to do stuff. At this point, I could say let's move everything over to the 327 from our bond projects, and then put the convention center on the bond.
Okay.
That could be a way too, and then you leave it up to the voters whether or not they want to fund that or not. But ultimately that doesn't matter. We need to have consistent funding for residential streets. And for the budget proposal, I don't like the idea of moving those certificates of obligations over to it. I'd rather change our policy to go from 1% to 3% of our general fund, go to residential streets. That way we have that guaranteed $6 million go to residential streets. And we'll look at other things to address. There's still some things in the budget that we can cut.
Yeah, that Councilman, you said it, but the 1% is about $3 million. So to triple that, we would need $6 more million, which is basically the entire library budget. So right now we have a proposal just for one branch, so we'd have to eliminate the entire library system under that scenario. Just an FYI. Yes. Or other options that.
Well, we'll send those emails to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll get a lot more.
The city manager, that's like saying that, that's also the, eliminating so many police officers, or eliminating so many firefighters,
I'm just putting that in context, so.
Eliminating, so many other things. But
right.
$3 million is the economic development department. right?
Okay, you could eliminate
right? You
that.
could eliminate that, or you could say, there's lots of things you could say that eliminate,
Right.
and that's one of those hand grenades you're trying to toss out
I'm just
there.
putting that in context. Animal care services is $6 million as well, so we
Right.
got that whole.
Absolutely.
God,
You know,
right.
we just,
Yeah.
our
Absolutely.
inboxes just went off the. Okay.
When I suggest the assistant city manager position, that's what,
We've got
$350,000,
Councilman
right?
Barretta would like to make some comments. Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. First off, Peter, thank you for, putting all this together. I know it's been somewhat, there's been obviously consternation about doing it all in the last minute. And I know, I say all the time, when you have to deal with 9 prima donnas, I'm sorry, Mayor, I mean 8. But when you have to deal with 9 prima donnas that are just constantly throwing ideas from you, 9 laymen, and, you're trying to come up with an educated answer. Obviously seconded this proposal, but I just have a couple of questions. First off, I want to comment on, we said we had 2,200 respondents on the survey, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to remind everybody, in the last presidential election, there was 103,000 people that voted. So I think that's a very small representation to try and say the public has spoken. So this is that perspective of which we have to have, and that's why we get elected, to be able to make these decisions. Peter, I guess in your 5 years, how much money would you say that you have appropriated to the construction of streets?
Right. So in the past 3 years, Councilman, we have done, the council, who has placed this as a number 1 priority, the city council has authorized about $350 million for streets in the last 3 years. So I would say in excess of $500 million over 5 years. So yeah.
And then you have any idea what the prior numbers were from the prior council?
Ooh, they were real low, Councilman. I don't have that with me, but I would submit that it wasn't anywhere near the annual amount that we do right now in this budget that we proposed. We have about 125 million. I think back 6 years ago, it was maybe in the 30 millions. It was very low.
In addition, there was a ton of lag where we have bond projects that were stale that were taking 5, 6, even some as much as 8 years to get done.
That's correct.
So,
and recall that we didn't, 6 years ago, we had really no public works department. We had no equipment, no access to appropriate materials, and no working relationship with the private contractors. And we have all that now. So we're self-performing. We have strong professional relationships with companies like Bay, Anderson, Columbia, and others who are performing and who I mentioned recently at a city manager's report are working Saturday and Sunday to get work done. That's phenomenal. So, yes.
So I just wanted to reiterate that even though, I guess 60% of the 2,200 indicated they still want us to work on streets, we've heard them loud and clear. And this suggestion or this recommendation, which Councilman Plusley moved to support, is another example of us listening to the public, so that way we can ensure. The thing I like about industrial streets is that I joke around. I said that tongue in cheek when the recommendation was for Bear Lane. I said, well, how many people vote out there? And I think this is a good way for us to reappropriate those funds, so that way the public can decide that they want to pursue that initiative for the industrial street, or we have that resource, and then that way we're spending their money or the funds that we generate, so that way they can see the activity and their residential street gets taken care of that much more quickly. Because I've heard Councilman Plusley say before, even if street construction is going down all around you and your street's not getting fixed, and you drive on it every day, that you're thinking these streets aren't getting fixed, and why am I being neglected? Okay. You know, with regard to all the improvements that are needed at the American Bank Center, and we obviously, with $100 million of just getting it up to back up to a standard of neglect that once again came from prior councils that had every intention, I'm sure, of trying to manage with the funds of what they had. And so now we're having to pay for that, because now we're having to make $100 million decision to invest in that capital for a revenue producing asset. What method, Heather, provides us with the most favorable financing? If we're utilizing, Councilman Hunter brought other resources up. Which method gives us the most favorable financing?
So our highest credit would be GOs or COs. The type A and type B, because it is sales tax, does have a very high credit rating because it is a known commodity, it is a known revenue source. But our highest credit would be either our GO or COs, which are backed by property taxes.
Okay. All right. Here, that's my other question. And then I guess if we move this into type B, then it's going to basically be that the type B board will have, we mentioned some streets that are particularly in this bond package. So I guess how would that look then in 2 years with type B, or is it the way it works now, where if there's a project that we feel that requires some level of necessity and it's an industrial street, is it going to work the same way where we bring back to the type B board?
Exactly. So this would be authorized under the type B. And because, as we've discussed with the ballot language, it is for a purpose. So projects are brought forward on an individual basis. They are subject to public hearing and decision by the type B board. Type B board then would make a recommendation to City Council for it to be included in the budget.
Okay. Now, okay. Let me see now on the, okay, you already answered this question. I'm sorry, I'm going through all my notes here. Well, and then I go back to, and I want to reiterate, well, here, one more time, and I almost wish, I'm a whiteboard kind of guy that, when you were coming back with all the resources that Councilman Pusley was talking about. So on this method, is it going to be able, how much funds, and you can come back to it if you want me to move on to another question. What is it? You can come back to it. So how much funds would be available for the American Bank Center on an annual basis with all the resources that we have, if we utilize them all?
Would that also include hotel occupancy tax?
Yes.
Okay, so for this calculation, we would have the 4.7 million that is currently in the 2% that is specifically for the American Bank Center, for the Convention Center. We probably have at least another $2 million within HOT that we could allocate to this project. So that would give us a total of 6.7 or almost $7 million. And then if we move forward with the 50% allocation of the type B funding, so 50% for the American Bank Center and the other entertainment and cultural facilities, along with 50% for streets, that would allocate, say, about another $4.5 million. And from there, we'd have to prioritize, would it go to the American Bank Center, or what other projects are available out there. So a total of 11, almost $12 million a year.
Okay, excellent. And I think that's one of the things that we need to sell to the public. Obviously, that once again, this council has been committed to streets, as well as the prior council, and we recognize that we've had to live with that neglect, and we're coming up with resources to be able to do that. I know some people are trying to basically come back and say, we've got all this debt, but we've just got to get the work done. We've got to get the work done, and our bond ratings are obviously very strong, and we have the ability to do that. Our community's grown. Let's see. I had one. Well, and then the other thing I want to reiterate is that, and I've said it before, and I said it earlier, that the American Bank, the C district, is a revenue producing asset. If we don't have a good facility there, then we don't have Showtime boxing. We don't have HBO boxing. We don't have CBS doing the PBR, the Pro Bull Riding, events. Then we don't have the first-class acts that could come in here on a regular basis. We don't have the Chris Stapletons and the Dwight Yoakams and a whole bunch of other people that I'm too old to figure out who they are. But I know that they're very popular. And to echo what Councilman Roy had indicated, is that the multiplier effect of all the activity that happens in the downtown area as a result, people always say that, why can't we be like this other community? Well, we're at that point that's the whole thing. That's part of the reason all these other communities have these revenue producing assets, so that way it invites commerce. And it has a multiplier effect, more sales tax, more hot tax, more state hotel occupancy tax. So I think this is, once again, it's a good compromise. It identifies the issue of, I know what the industrial streets I have over there at Way Out Weber. I know that all those businesses are frustrated. So thank you for all the burning the midnight oil to bring this to us. I think it's a great proposal. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Pesley.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. So, and I didn't say this before, and I think this is important. By doing this compromise and moving and putting the commercial street section into the sales tax, we then can go adjust the 2024 bond proposal to include residential streets, because our bond packages before, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was talking to Councilman Hunter before the meeting, I think it goes back to like 2016 bond, maybe, when we actually had residential streets carved out in a specific bond language. Since then, it's been pretty much arterials and collectors.
Right.
And so, and we, that's been our goal, at least since I've been here.
Right.
And we've fixed Staples and Airline and Everhart, and I mean, we've done some big projects. So this would allow us to allocate specific $35 or $36 million for residential streets specifically in our 2024 bond.
That's correct, Councilman. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that adds to it. And I understand Councilman Hernandez's point, and I think for next year that ought to be a goal. I'm not going to be here, but I thank God.
Yeah.
And anyway, I think that would be a good goal, because to do that this year, we'd have, if I'm wrong, tell me, Heather, we'd have to submit for a tax increase. Right now, our proposal for this budget is the tax rate's going to stay flat.
Exactly. So the budget was built off of the 59.9 cents.
Right.
And so if we were to increase the transfer over for residential streets, we would either have to do another close to $6 million worth of cuts out of the general fund, or produce more revenue, which could be.
Yeah, we'd have to cut $6 million more, or we'd have to increase the tax rate.
Exactly.
Okay. And so I should have mentioned that before when I made my motion about the moving the residential street section in. It gives us more money to do for residential streets. And with respect to the survey, and I'm sympathetic to that, but we also heard from organizations, we received letters from, and I may miss one, so correct me if I'm wrong, we got letters of support from for doing just the ABC Center, no, not street, just from the Chamber, the Visit Corpus Christi, the Buccaneer Commission, the Hotel Group, and I think there was another one. I can't remember all of them. I was going to print the letters out. And pardon?
Downtown Management District?
Yeah.
The DMD board voted,
yeah.
right, for just the American Bank Center.
Yeah, DMD board. I forgot them, the Downtown Management District. How could I forget that? So anyway, but I did want to make one modification to my motion when I did that a while ago. I would like my motion to say that the ballot language would convert this to a type B instead of type A. Do I need to make that in part of my motion, or
It's in there, right, Heather?
It's in,
Yeah, it's in the recommendation.
It's in the
it's
recommendation.
in the recommendation?
Yeah, so we can-
Oh, I'm sorry. I
That's
didn't-
okay.
Yeah, you're right, it is. It's in, so it would be a type B, which means we don't necessarily have to get real specific
Yeah.
with respect to it. And something Councilman Suxley mentioned a while ago, when we get to talking about the seawall, maybe in this lifetime, that instead of having to list specific flood control programs that we don't have to do that.
We
That
do
the
not.
ballot language could leave that out, because it could also be a type B.
It can,
Which
yes.
means we could, the next council can identify where they want to spend that stormwater money.
Yes,
Doesn't have to necessarily be the projects that we have listed in this book.
exactly. And just clarification, it would need to go to the, just like now, it has to go to the type B board.
Right.
They would consider those projects, do the public hearings, and then it would come to city council for as a recommendation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll check my notes here. I think that's all I had right now. Thank you.
okay.
And just clarification on your motion too, was that for the 20-year term?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to verify. Yes.
Councilman Klein.
Thank you. Thanks, Heather, for the presentation. I'm looking at, option D here, and I guess I just need some clarification on this. As I understand it, residential streets will go into the bond 2024.
Yes.
So the question I guess I have, we've been talking about money, $35 million, I guess, that had been in for commercial and arterials, now going toward residential streets. I think that's a good idea. And I understand why there's a focus on the dollar amount, because we're talking about budget issues here. But I think for the general public, we need to look at, instead, how much money we're spending on these streets, at how many streets we're getting completed. I want lane miles measurement of that, because my suspicion is that the $35 million that would have gone toward commercial streets is going to do a great deal more in residential streets.
That is correct.
Yeah, and so I guess I'd just like some clarification, I guess, on how much that would be. I think that would help to benefit the public. And then, I guess maybe it's a minor thing, I don't know.
$1 million per lane mile. Okay, so clarification, it is about $1 million per lane mile, so that would do approximately 35 lane miles.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. So again, I need clarification, I guess, for that as well, because my assumption is that, again, I'm thinking about Alameda, right, as one of those arterials. Large reason for the expense, I assume, is because we're not just talking about tearing up the street, but tearing up everything underneath the street.
That is correct.
And with the residential streets, you don't have to do that.
No, you don't. And for clarification, so normally within those street projects, the water and wastewater we receive funding through the water and wastewater funding to do those infrastructure replacements. So the general fund money is normally going for the street reconstruction along with the stormwater needs along those lines too. But it is not necessarily for the infrastructure for the utilities that is being replaced.
So the $1 million a mile is just for the surface?
Yes.
Right, all right, thank you for that. And then we're talking about authorizing this as type B now.
Yes.
Minor thing, I guess. Has the type B board been communicated with about this?
So we've
It
been
seems like as if this is going to be taking a lot of things out of their hands.
Well, actually, it wouldn't. This would be, they would have this within their hands. Right now, they are, the Type B and the Type A board, we have the same members on both boards. And so their Type A is under their purview. This would just be switching over to a Type B authorization, so it'd still be under the same purview of the same board. It's just named slightly differently because of the authorization of the statute.
Again, I just want to be sure I'm understanding this correctly.
Yes.
Those arterials, the $35 million that we're
Yes.
moving now toward Type B, so they're not going to decide whether they're going to do those streets. That's already been decided for them.
Yes and no. So right now with Type A, so the money that's being utilized right now for the arena, also for the seawall, we bring forward, city staff brings forward recommendations to the Type B board for the projects that we recommend utilization of the Type A sales tax for the arena and for the seawall funding. This would be the same thing. If it's authorized under Type B, we would still come on an annual basis with the recommendation for projects. We actually currently do this under the street funding that is included under Type B already. We bring forward recommendations. They consider those recommendations and then approve or ask for additional recommendations. So it's basically the same. It's just their focus would be now on street projects versus, the seawall projects or arena projects or things like that.
Right. Right. All right, I had one other question unrelated to those. This has to do with the seawall fund.
Sure.
Seawall flood control. Would it be possible, if we reauthorize this, if the voters vote for this, would it be possible for that money to be used then to help finance the aspects of the, what they call it, the Marina Master Plan? That's been shown to us? Because I think the voters would be very skittish about that, I think, but I don't know that.
So the way that the language is being proposed right now, it's primarily for infrastructure and does not include any type of vertical or building type of improvements. So a few of the things within the Marina Master Plan, this funding could be utilized if we are doing reinforcing the T and the L heads, if looking at the bulk heading, things like that. But if this money, as it is written correct right now, would not be able to be utilized for any of those amenities that we're talking about through the Marina Master Plan.
Restaurants built into or on the seawall would not be eligible?
No, would not be eligible under this. So infrastructure to support those, it could, but they would have to be for the benefit of the flood control system.
Right.
And so we wouldn't be able to provide funding for those amenities.
Okay, great, thanks. That's all I have.
Yeah, and Councilman, just to add, which would be important, as an example, the breakwater, that semicircle rock system, we would hate to invest millions on the land masses and only have them have that investment washed away, because of a tidal surge. So right now we know that the breakwater needs improvement. Some of the top is shaved off over the decades, and it may have sunken a little bit as well. So these monies could be used to protect any other investments made vertically up, on the land masses. So I think the answer is yes, that it would support the master plan in an indirect way, being the substructures, and then additional funds could be sought for the actual improvements, any type of building or that type of thing.
There's talk about either expanding or maybe creating an entirely separate breakwater, I guess out in front of North Beach.
Right, and so the language, Heather, it's in the slide here, but we, based on council input earlier this week, we expanded the language for North Beach, not only for the linear canal, but for other breakwater protection systems as well.
Okay, great.
Yes, sir, yeah.
Councilman Hernandez.
Thank you. I understand that this is a kind of a compromise deal with moving stuff over, but we're the only ones really privy to it, right? To Mr. Loeb's point, it's going to take a lot of time and effort and money to try and communicate something like this. So there is a very real possibility that you get the bond passed with the residential streets on it and this not passing as part of that. So therein lies the challenge of that. I'm not sure if it would pass that way, just by the language of what we're talking about here. So I would caution everyone on this that we also ultimately have to put something in front of the voters that'll pass. Now, in looking at this is better than, putting it all on the convention center, which is what Proposition 8 was last time. But there's still that opportunity in that aspect. So I don't know. I caution you on that.
Can I just add to that, Councilman, that so in the, 8 months of dialogue Heather's had with and other teammates with the community, that this option here has been talked about. It hasn't been maybe on our printed material, but early on this was one of the ones that was easily talked about in many of the forums, which was how do we do streets plus the American Bank Center. And yours, Councilman, your idea was a good one too, which had Bank Center, streets, and military. So in many of the conversations for the 8 months, this combination, in fact, has been out there. Today just kind of puts it in writing and lists it as a specific option.
Okay, you've already spoken for.
Councilwoman Campos.
Thank you for keeping up, Rebecca. All right, so how about this? How about we switch? How about we use the 327 and we put all these projects for the C district on the bonds? Why not be able to switch it that way? Why do we have to have the option of this 1D? I mean, that would be the other option. Instead of looking at the 32 to 36 million in residential streets, move those projects over to the 327 and move the C projects to a bond project. Why would that be possible? Could we look at that?
So
that way,
it definitely is possible. One of the things that in consideration is that this funding would not only be for the immediate needs of the C district assets, but also the ongoing needs of the C district assets. So we will need to continue that once the improvements are made, identifying that funding to continue making sure that they are properly maintained, that there's a good a robust capital improvement program to replace those assets so that we don't end up in the situation we are now with almost $100 million in improvements that are needed.
And I see that, and that I think that's why I see the beauty in the 327, because it would be up again in 4 years, and we could actually look at that again and see, is this working for us? The other thing is, we also have been looking, and thank goodness, Peter has done a good job at addressing our streets since his tenure, but just like we spend about, 50% of our budget on police and fire, and we have invested in heavily lately in our police and fire. I'm also thinking, have we ever, do we know the numbers for residential streets? Like, what would it cost to actually address? We always say that we're never going to have enough police and fire to address all the crime and everything that our city or any city experiences. It's never going to be done just through the police and fire, or mainly police. But do we have a number, Peter, on what it would actually cost to address the residential streets?
Yes, we do. Neiman will share that information right now.
If you recall, when we did do the rapid pavement program presentation initially, we was looking at the entire network, and it was nearly $1 billion.
$1 billion?
Nearly $1 billion in approximately 63 years to complete those repairs, with the understanding that what was repaired throughout that 63 years will go into a deterioration cycle. So that's when we depicted it as that endless cycle. So that's
okay. So we're looking at $1 billion, and so if we're right now, we only dedicate how much of that? You said that we spent 350.
All funds, including the bond program, in the budget I presented on Tuesday, we have 100 and just a second here. We have 120 million.
So like 1%.
Right, but that $1 billion includes the old way of doing the program. That's pre-rapid paving, so that means replacing all the utilities in addition to the pavement, curb, sidewalk. So under the rapid paving program, there was
under the rapid paving program, and I'm glad
it was 50%.
It's about a third of that, a third of the cost if you do it the rapid pavement program.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and that's why I see the need in this 327, because we are only addressing right now the street, because people want to see results. They want to be able to drive their cars to their homes and to work. So what this would do is it would at least open up a way to address the other infrastructure that we have been ignoring for decades and decades, which is sidewalks. I know that may not be, a big item for some of our council members, but I know that it is something that is still needed and wanted and expressed on a regular basis, I know, to me. So again, I think this would be another way of looking, because like I say, all of us know how important it is to keep our buildings up and running. I was just last night, I was at the McDonald Library, and I want to say there was I think 100 people there. It was for a great event. It's the Pláticas at Tejano, the Tejano history, and it was hot because, the chillers were not working. There was problems, with our building, our library building, which, so I know how I experience it, they experience it. But then I also look at the building next door, Peter. Right next door is the Greenwood Senior Center.
Right.
And I was thinking, here is, we just renovated it. I just visited that center, and it's got like the brand new table and the new roof, and the air condition seems to be working really well. So I'm thinking, why not like be able to utilize those buildings interconnectedly, when they have bigger events like that, to be able to move them over maybe, to the senior center. But again, I'm just stating the fact that, we do realize that we need to take care of what we have.
Right.
So this is the predicament that we have, and all I'm suggesting is that we switch, if we can consider switching the sales tax to a dedicated fund so that we can pay as you go, and then put the other projects on our bond. So.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Roy?
Before I go forward, and just with your comments, I thought about that. But I want to ask you, why? Why do you think, and I just want to understand for my own clarification, one of the things we're tasked with is looking at streets. We know that it's important. The survey said that it was important to the people, and so this compromise kind of covers that. But what is the benefit, just from my own knowledge, I think, in terms of bringing up that we switch them and we put the convention center information on the bond, and then we do the 327. I think if I understood this right, if we go with a 4-year program, is that the best funding source?
It is, it's only secured for the 4 years.
It's only secured for the 4 years.
Yeah.
So we're at risk in terms of the future of losing that.
Yes, so it would, just like we're going through this right now, where the sales tax would expire, it would expire after 4 years. We have to go back and reauthorize.
Right. Every 2 years when we go out and we do a bond, there's the possibility that the voters will not vote on that bond and it could be shot down. It happens. So we put that program at risk. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things, again, that I have to really look at is the fact that when we are doing programs that benefit the downtown, that benefit all of those things that are revenue-based, then that helps us. Streets, there is a direct tie-in to a degree to revenue, but at the same time, we know that there's a direct correlation when we have the ability to have an event downtown, that the retailers as a whole say that there's definitely a significant benefit. But the other thing is I just want to make sure that everybody understands and the community is listening, is that we listen to the survey. This compromise, I think, follows exactly in terms of what the survey is. This is not something where we've turned a blind eye to the survey and looked the other way. We've got a path here to continue with residential streets. We have a path for commercial and industrial, and to continue working on and preserving some of the assets that we have downtown. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that again. This is the second time I've spoken, but I wanted people to understand that, because I think there's a misnomer out there where people are saying, okay, we're basically ignoring a survey, and we're not ignoring a survey. There were 3 surveys done, and I know that I read every page of those surveys. Surveys are interesting. You can debate whether or not some surveys are good and some surveys, are done better than others. But at the end of the day, one thing is going to be for sure is that, are the voters going to vote for this? At the end of the day, it's the voters that make the decision. And I also wanted to say one other thing. The Prop A that died before, it didn't die because of the American Bank Center. It died because people basically said that they didn't want a convention hotel linked into the Prop A. So I just want to make sure that I'm on record for saying that, to make sure that I state that. So.
Yeah, that's it's important to point that out. So there is no hotel at all anywhere in this proposal. No hotel and no expansion to the convention center complex. A renovation of critical infrastructure systems like roofs that leak today, chillers that are broken, electrical systems that are shorting out, that type of thing.
Yeah, I wanted to reiterate that that's why that proposition, the people voted down because they didn't want a convention center. And so I've had my two opportunities to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. May I respond? You can, but I'm gonna go to Councilman Suckley. His light was on, and then we'll circle back, and then we'll call the vote. Councilman Suckley.
Thanks, Mayor. Just circling back to my comment earlier about possible consideration of shifting on 1D, the percentage. You know, the majority of the conversation here this morning has seemed to have been where the percentage lies between streets and the American Bank Center. That's where most of the conversation has been. And to that point, you know, we've been provided a lot of information in the last several months about all the assets in the C district and how much money is there. To the point earlier, city manager mentioned, I think, $100 million or so of identified needs for the complex. But then we had another document that was shared with us too that had rough numbers of all the other things within the C district that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was over $200 million
Yes.
of all the needs that are identified.
Yeah.
So to my comment earlier about consideration of the flood and coastal resiliency, maybe carving that back a little bit, is we have some ideas of how that can be spent, but we have defined particular needs that we've identified on the American Bank Center portion of it. So, and again, to Councilman Roy's comment, and I think some others commented on it, and I think Councilman Barrera did, is the American Bank Center C District complex are revenue producing to the city. And we need to continue to remember that a lot of our budget is made up of two primary sources of funding: property taxes and sales taxes. So if we're doing things to accentuate the ability to drive more sales tax to the city and to our budget, then that should be considered. So, thank you.
Councilwoman Campos.
Thank you, Mayor. And I know I already spoke twice, so, but I just wanted to respond to Councilman Everett's point about why Prop A failed. I just wanted to add that the other reason that it failed is because there was not going to be an end to that prop. So and that's why I like 327, because we can come back to it. So that was the only point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Call.
Yeah, we're
an hour overdue.
okay. We have a motion, we have a second, and we've had discussion. So I'm going to ask everyone to please submit their vote. And what about Councilman Barrera?
Mayor. Councilmember Barrera, what is your vote? It's proposition, the initial motion that you seconded.
Yes, I vote aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, so it's 6-3, Mayor.
6-3. Okay, the motion carries.
How do we feel?
Well,
Who voted besides Trump?
Me, Gil, and Sylvia. Okay. We're the bad guys.
No, man, as always.
And we actually do, so we have two different votes. One was for the first 1/8 cents, and then we'll need to do a second vote for the second 1/8 cents.
all done. Go ahead, Councilman.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommendation of making it flood mitigation and moving it to type B.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? I'm sorry?
I make a motion to go with the recommendation of making the seawall fund into a flood mitigation fund to include the seawall and projects throughout the city, and also converting it to a type B.
For a 20-year term, right, Councilman?
For a 20-year term.
For a 20-year term, okay.
Wait.
I don't know that we had I think we had it both ways, but.
Yeah, I'm not clear on what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
You talking about doing this?
It's our only recommendation.
Right.
Councilman Suckley.
Citywide stormwater flood drainage.
Yeah, I had brought up the idea the other day Councilman Hernandez, and I didn't hear it in your motion, and it's not in the recommendation, but do we consider setting aside 10 million or whatever is in that current funding mechanism through the maturity of specifically identified for seawall usage? So we know we have that money set aside.
We'd already did that when we did that motion to specifically assign the remaining funding from the seawall fund into that. We approved that.
We approved it. You want to address that?
Yeah, that was in relation to Proposition A, which should not pass. And so that.
Well, that could be done separately. I mean, because
it could.
Because
So
that funding is specifically for under the previous legislation, right? So it's not like you can mix the two.
Or we could also do a financial policy. If this does move forward, we could do a financial policy to set a minimum reserve amount. And that would be my recommendation versus trying to put it in the ballot language, because then it can get confusing. But yes, the financial policies can be updated to allow to set that reserve at a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage.
And also, Dan, I wanted to by making it into type B, you make it for stormwater throughout the city. So if there's ever an issue that comes up in Flower Bluff or the island, like the area around Snoopy's or those kind of areas, you could still use it because it's purpose specific and not project specific.
Yeah, I know that, but the information we have in the packet shows nothing in those areas, and so I think that's important that.
Well, and I had that conversation with Councilman Pusley about not including all the specific projects in the ballot or requirement because it is purpose specific about stormwater and resiliency. And right now, it's truly important because we only have $26 million, and I didn't look at it for what this year's budget is, that comes out of our rates for stormwater. We don't even have we don't have money in that to go with grants from the state. So this is really, truly important to include it citywide.
Yeah. So.
Wait, hold on. Heather.
It is. Heather, so with respect to possibly putting that in policy?
Yes.
How would that occur? And if it is, can we communicate that to the community as we lead up to the election?
We can definitely include that. So, but the procedure would be, we have the fiscal budgetary policies, which actually we'll be bringing forward for consideration on the 13th. That could be part of that minimum fund balance or minimum reserve, and included in that financial policy that would set the minimum reserve amount. And we could definitely work with engineering to understand, what make a recommendation on that. It can be included in the financial policy. Then what we could do is, this is not the end of our public outreach. We would continue to do public outreach and education as we move after the election is called, as we move towards the election. And that's definitely something that we can educate the public on, is that there would be a minimum amount set aside for a reserve of some type to be able to protect the seawall. And we can even do that we could do it over a number of years, or we could say the first, 10 million in revenue, or however, what that appropriate level is, put that aside.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilman Pusley.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I support the motion, but I think it's really important we address what Councilman Suckley is saying, because right now in our package, it has these specific projects attached, but the way this language would be drafted, you could say this is for citywide stormwater prevention or improvements, I guess would be the word.
Yes.
And because his concern is valid. I mean,
yes.
Flower Bluff and the island are part of the city, and we need to make sure that they understand that this can include, although some of these projects that are listed in here are great, especially the ones for the northwest area that Councilman Roy and I are very familiar with. But I think making it type B where it's, not project specific is the better way to go.
Definitely, and we can continue as we work through this education process. We worked with Public Works on those larger projects that affected numerous areas. We can definitely work with them to continue identifying what we could possibly kind of include on that preliminary list that would be specifically for Flower Bluff and or the island. I know that coastal resiliency is a really big one on the island. Look to that on some of the beach protection and things like that. And that is very much a revenue generator. That is our tourism area, and it does help protect our businesses and expand them.
Great point, Heather. That's extremely important. So, and thank you to Councilman Suckley for bringing that up. I think that's very, very important for us to address. Thank you.
Sure. Councilman Hunter.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for a third clarification, you stated earlier that those projects are of no priority in order.
There's no priority.
In fact, there's a lot of projects that could be a higher priority than what is given. Those are just examples.
Exactly. Those were projects that were within our master plan that we felt help protect and expand business,
Sure.
because remember, this is an economic development tool, so making sure that it is not just because it's a flooding area, but whether it is hindering growth, whether it is protecting existing businesses or allowing for business or commerce to expand. Those were the projects that we identified first glance. Definitely on the island, that is a large tourism area. We do have a lot of businesses in that area, so finding other things that we could do more towards maybe the coastal resiliency, or that type of stuff. We can definitely identify additional, but no, those were just the ones that were identified that we felt were all eligible, but they are not in any particular order or any particular priority.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we need to make an amendment to set, for our motion to set a minimum reserve amount for the seawall?
My recommendation is
Just
we do it through
wait.
our financial policy versus trying to include
That's what you told him earlier, but we don't need to.
We don't need to
Okay,
know,
good.
versus
Good.
including it in the
Ready to
ballot
vote.
language. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Sure.
And just for clarification, you had recommended type A. I'm recommending type B.
Our original recommendation was type A, just because that's what the conversation would be, but we can definitely
Right.
authorize this under type
And
B.
I say that because it's purpose specific, so that if you do have something come up
Yes.
in another area, i.e. Flower Bluff or the island or
Exactly.
something like that, you have some opportunity
Exactly.
to repurpose and
Yes.
prioritize.
Yes.
So.
Cal Allen.
Or Cal Allen.
Exactly, anywhere across the
Or
city.
Cal Allen,
And one of the things to point out too is that, we utilize,
downtown.
just like our current type A 1/8 cent sales tax, our revenues have come in higher than what we projected just because we are very conservative. And so this
Right.
would also allow flexibility to add projects as they come
Right.
forward, as that revenue does grow.
Okay, and that honestly, we just didn't have enough money for stormwater. We just didn't.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and I, in talking to the guys over there, Gabriel Hinojosa, and I know I had many conversations with them, so, I want to make sure that they have the resources they need to take care of our stormwater.
So I agree. I think that's a good idea. I think we've learned from past experience that to make it easy and make sure that we're not sitting at a later point trying to make sure that in terms of validating future projects, I agree. I think that's a good idea to move it over to type B. Okay. So that was the only input that I had. I'm for it.
Okay.
Call the question? Talk again.
Oh.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the seawall vote, so please submit your vote.
You have to open public comment.
Oh, yeah.
Here, I vote aye.
I'm sorry, yeah. Thank you. Well, there you are.
You guys see me, though. Let
Okay,
me know when you see me.
you're on file.
I vote aye.
Before we go there, let me go ahead and open public hearing. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to make comment on item number 2? Okay, there being no one, we'll close public comment, and please submit your vote.
Yes, and as you stated, Mr. Barrera voted aye, so.
Okay, the
It's
motion
9-0.
carries. Okay, so Rebecca, we're kind of a little out of order here, so we're going
Yes,
to go to
ma'am.
number,
Item number 1, which is to
1.
talk about the bond 2024 project list.
okay, and who is going to present on that?
I will, Madam Mayor.
No, okay,
And before we start, let me do note that The mayor and council, you all have received 2 presentations. If you look at the title page of the slide, you'll see that they're annotated with either option 1 or option 2. Option 1 is the option 2, Roger. The update one. The option 1 was the original plan that was briefed a couple of days ago, and historically. Option 2 is a reflection of the council vote now, where we do remove some of the arterials, collectors, or commercial and industrial streets from the bond and add a street project named Neighborhood Streets. So I'll show you all exactly what that looks like.
Mayor, I know this is probably never ever done here. We possibly take a 10-minute break.
We could take a little pause.
Okay.
Do you mind, Dr. Young? Yeah, let's take a few minutes. We'll take a little pause, and we'll come right back within 10 minutes.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, we're take a quick break, and we'll return.
People want to take a cleansing break.
God sneezing.
Cover your mouth. Okay, we're going to go ahead and reconvene our meeting. We're out of order, but we're on the last item, but that is item number 1, and that is to go over, well, we're going to wait 1 minute. That's to go over the Bond 2024 program project lists. And Dr. Young will join us in just a moment.
All right, thank you.
Ready to go?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. As stated before, if you look before you, there were 2 handouts that were provided to you all. One was the handout of the original bond proposal that's been discussed over the last 8 months. And then we also have handed out another packet which reflects council vote for 1D for the Type AB sales tax. You can find that slide is titled Option 2 on the first page of the packet. So as a reminder, in accordance with you all's most recent vote, what you all are recommending or have approved is the removal of some of the industrial/commercial streets out of the bond packet. The recommended streets include Lower Broadway for $10 million, Yorktown Design Only for $4 million, the Alameda Construction Only project for $17 million, the Alameda Design Only project for $3.5 million, and reducing the San Rakin project by $500,000. And we'll show how that's reflected in the future slides. So based off of those changes, the bond packet proposal remains the same, $175 million, as opposed to $125 million that was overwhelmingly approved by our voters in November 2022. This is the change for Bond 2024 as based off of you all's vote. We now have 18 street projects, 11 parks projects, 7 public safety projects, and 2 cultural facility projects for a total of 38 projects. For the street projects, if you note in the red font, that reflects the removal of Lower Broadway and the removal of the Yorktown project. We still maintain for citywide the North Beach Road project for $3 million. In addition, if you note in the green font, we have added the Neighborhood Streets project for $35 million, which will bring that total for citywide projects to a total of $38 million. So I should note, as the city manager has stated, the proposed budget for fiscal year 25 for the rapid paving program, specifically for our residential streets, is $26 million. By approving this neighborhood streets project in Bond 2024, will be more than doubling the city's investments in our residential streets with Bond 2024. In addition to doubling our investment in our residential streets, we will be able to escalate that strategy of reducing our street renovations from 63 years to 12 years. In addition, in District 1, we still maintain Rand Morgan Design Only for $3 million. And here you'll notice in the red font is a reflection where we reduced San Rakin from $3 million to $2.5 million, bringing the total for District 1 to $5.5 million for street projects. For District 2, we'll maintain South Staple Access Road for $6 million. And you'll note in red font, we have removed the Alameda Construction Only project and the Alameda Design Only project, bringing the total investment in District 2 streets to $6 million. For District 3, we're maintaining design only for both Allen Crest and Shannon. In District 4, we have a continuation project with this construction of Holly Road for $11 million, design only for the expansion of Graham Road, $3.7 million to improve a neighborhood cluster in the Terra subdivision on Flower Bluff, and $1 million to plus up the JFK Causeway project. In District 5, we have design-only funding for Cimarron, Acushnet, Lipes, Grand Junction, Rodfield, and Brook. In addition, we have a $1.5 million that will be dedicated to a trail connectivity project in District 5. For parks, our recommendations remain the same. $10 million for the replacement of the Oso Golf Center clubhouse. $4.5 million for the TC Ayers Aquatic Center. $3.15 million for the Labonte Park expansion project, and $3 million that will be invested in Cheryl Veterans Memorial Park. In District 2, we're requesting $1 million for Cole Park parking lot improvements. In District 3, we're requesting $2.75 million for our continued investment in the upgrades and improvements to the Greenwood Baseball Complex. And we're also requesting $2.5 million for investing in improvements in St. Andrews Park. For District 4, we're seeking $5 million to do improvements in Commodore's Park, $2 million for Perry Place, and $1 million to build a new boat ramp for Dimmitt Pier. In District 5, we're looking for $2.75 million to address infrastructure and security issues in Billwood Park. Going into public safety, requesting $25 million to replace both Fire Station 8 and Fire Station number 10, and $5 million to pay for the design of the replacements for Fire Station 9 and Fire Station 11. On the police side of the house, we're requesting $9 million for the construction of the Northwest Police Substation, $5 million for the construction of the Far South Police Station, and $1 million to start the design for an additional substation that will be built near La Palmyra Mall. For cultural facilities, we're looking for $2 million for the design of an independent and standalone library/community center in District 5, and $0.85 million for renovations to our historical homes at Heritage Park. The next slide before you really depicts the language reflecting what will go on the ballot if approved in November. Proposition A, streets. Proposition B, Parks and Recreation. Proposition C, Public Safety. And Proposition D, Cultural Facilities. You all have seen this calendar before. If you notice, it's bold. August 1st is where we currently stand. And then going into August 13th, we'll start our one reading ordinance calling for the election. And in November, the language will be included on the ballot for voter consideration. We'll stand by for any questions or concerns from council.
Councilman Suckley.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Neiman. Appreciate the presentation. With removal of the arterials and collectors, how will, if any, that change the timing of those projects to be able to move through design, construction, whatever it is? Is there going to be any effect on the progress that we would make based off of changing those funding sources?
And we'll be sitting down with our engineering department, but I don't anticipate that there will be any significant impact for the timeline, whether it's funded, through the bond funding or if they were funded through the Type A sales tax, since they're both going to ballot in November.
Okay. Lastly, and we sort of touched on this with the discussion earlier, with respect to assets and the ability to activate the dollars that we have. And right now, the RPP program, correct me if I'm wrong, is caught up in basically needing funding to continue making progress. So with doubling the investment in the residential streets, are we confident that we can activate those dollars efficiently to gain the sort of momentum and traction that we're anticipating?
Yes, sir. And to put it in perspective, we have brought ourselves up to speed in our IMP program, which is also now named the Rapid Paving Program. Traditionally, we've been 2 calendar years behind in the Rapid Paving Program or the IMP program. This year, since Council has approved the Rapid Paving Program, we've actually caught up and actually gotten to the point where we've accomplished over 31 centerline miles of street improvements as compared to 6 to 7 under the Legacy program. And we are, as stated before, running dangerously close of running out of funding before the end of the fiscal year. So we anticipate with gaining this additional funding, we won't be facing as much of a capacity issue as we are facing the funding issue. So we're confident that, if afforded this funding, to apply to the IMP, we'll be able to accommodate it and continue to progress in the Rapid Paving Program.
Okay. Thanks, Neiman. Appreciate it.
Councilman Pesley.
No, thank you, Mayor. So, Neiman, I just want to be sure, and it's important to note that these, although these are shown up as red line and being taken out of here, they're being moved over to the sales tax
That's correct.
column. So these projects are not getting canceled. They're
That's
just
correct.
being funded by a different mechanism.
That's a good
Okay.
point, sir.
With respect to the, let me get back here, the cultural deal, that's for the Martin House, and is that, or are we dedicating that specifically to certain project? Ah, dang it, I can't find it now. There it is.
Page 27.
Yes.
Yeah, 20, yeah, well, I don't have page numbers on this. For design, demolish, construction, renovating, improving, expanding, the equipping city cultural facilities up to and leveling and tax repayment. So can you talk about that? Is that just going to be for some specific projects, or is that all of the area, the
homes?
All of the heritage homes?
Yes, sir. That is, that is, if you look on page 22 of your packet, that is dedicated to those houses that specifically stated in the bond project. That includes the Lichtenstein home, the Little Martin's house, and the Tex-Mex Railroad home.
Okay.
Yeah, so just 3 of them, Councilman, are identified right now.
Okay.
Well,
And we
if-
cut, yeah,
I'm so sorry, if I may, the language does say with priority given. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying I want to derail from that, but it looks like they could be, the monies can be spent with priority given first to the community senior center facility, including public library, and then historical houses in Heritage Park.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's more than those 3.
Yeah, so there's several ways to communicate the bond program. One will be the voter's guide that'll have more detail. What you're looking at is the ballot language, which is a little more simplistic. But we could add in the voter's guide that the Lichtenstein, Little Martins, and Tex-Mex would be the priority. And once that work's complete, if there's money remaining, we could add it to other homes in the Heritage Plaza Park. These 3 are identified because they're the worst of the, they're the worst in that complex. So Little Martin's house, we know the NAACP use that for their headquarters, and we're trying to get them back in there. And the Lichtenstein house is also one that needs attention. And then the Tex-Mex building is a red building on the corner of Mesquite and Port, and recently was vacated from the tenant that used it for many years, so it's in real dire shape. And if we want to keep it or rent it back out to somebody else, it needs investment. So that's the 3 buildings have these are the priorities, but we can add that or other facilities once these are done, because there's a lot of need on that in that Heritage Park.
Yeah, because the reason I bring it up, I received an email from someone about the Galvan house.
Right, as did we, Councilman. So it's get all those buildings. If you don't,
They all need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It needs some attention. We're going to look to see in the operating budget if we can address some of the immediate needs. Yeah. And yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's all I had right now. Thank you.
Councilwoman Campos.
Thank you, Mayor. $17 million removed, or I guess will be placed on the sales, proposed sales. How did you, and it looks like, we're adding the 35 million. So it looks like 17 million is about half of the 35 million coming out of District 2. So does that mean that we're going to get half of the 35 million of the residential streets back to District 2? Because it looks like District 2 is the one that is getting the least amount of attention regarding for bond packages and for street repairs. So could you answer that? Are we going to be looking? Well, the other thing is I've also have asked Ernie in the past if we could go back to the worst streets first instead of like trying to divvy it up evenly among the districts, because for the longest time, District 2 has been the one that has suffered the most, and I feel that we continue to get ignored, and here we go. Black and white, $17 million removed from the bond package, and now it's going to be placed on the 1/8 cent tax that I myself did not approve. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, convince the taxpayers for that sales package. But again, I'm just looking at it black and white, 35 million for residential streets, 17 million removed out of District 2. How?
Yes, ma'am. Given the newness of the council vote, I'm not prepared to state that, yes, this will go to this specific district or this one. Rather, what I'd ask is for time and space for us to sit down with the Public Works Department and Engineering Department and bring back to council. Naturally, whatever plan neighborhood street project is going to be implemented will be voted on by council. And the recommendation that will be brought to you all is going to be a recommendation that's data-driven by our infrastructure management plan, our RPP plan, which of course is, PCI-driven. We bring that recommendation to council, and it really will be a council decision on how that funding is divvied up amongst the council.
Okay, well, I would appreciate if you could bring it to us by just worse. It doesn't matter what district it's in. I just want to see that for myself, and I would like for the community to see that for themselves, to see the PCI, and it doesn't matter what area, again. So
yes,
could you do that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right,
yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Roy.
Just for the record, if I remember in the original proposal that we had, Upper Broadway, we had Upper, Middle, and Lower Broadway.
That's correct.
Each for 10 million each. And I noticed that Middle Broadway was only mentioned. So really, when I take a look at District 1, we gave up about $20 million. And I understand that it, the most important thing is working on Upper Broadway because of the condition that it's in. So I just wanted to just kind of go on record and recognize that.
Yes, sir.
And I think where we're at right now, I concur that we need to be able to take care of the things that are most pertinent.
Yes, sir.
The other thing is just kind of going really back to what was the comments before as far as the historical homes. I know we've beaten this to death before, but hopefully a grant writer can help us get some grants and help us with those historical homes.
Yes, sir. And let me do state that we do have the money that hasn't been identified in the bond is just a portion of the funding. Council just recently voted to approve adding the renovations to Little Martin's house to the annual CDBG budget. So we are looking at multiple different funding streams in order to address that facility.
Yeah, I was just thinking about I got a recent note on the Galvin house also, and I just, every day it just solidifies the fact that we need to be really out there robustly looking for grants. So
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Pusley.
Okay. I can't ever tell whether you're saying Suckley or
I know.
Pusley. I apologize. Okay. The 17 million that Councilman Campos is talking about here, Neiman.
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming that she's talking about the Alameda Doddridge project for 17 million. Is that right? Is that what you're referring to? Well, that's not being eliminated.
No.
It's being moved.
Yes, sir.
It's being funded by, so that project's not going away.
Yes, sir.
Well, why didn't you say that?
Well, we stated that up front, sir.
Well,
I think you and I both.
I'm sorry, I'm not being critical. I'm just saying, I just got through saying a minute ago, these red line projects are not being deleted.
Yes, sir.
They're being moved to a different funding source.
Yes, sir.
So they still will be funded and still will be done, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what my point is.
Yes, sir.
We need to quit showing it in this manner because that's not what we're doing. We need to show that these are being moved to a different funding source and not being deleted.
Yes, sir. Can do.
Okay, that's all the comments or questions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and entertain a motion. What's that? Oh,
Did you
public.
want to ask for public comment, Mayor?
Well, we do have a no, I don't think we did. Let me go ahead and open public hearing. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to make comment on item number 1? Okay, there being no one, we'll close public hearing. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Please submit your vote.
I'm sorry, Mayor, who made the motion? We missed
Councilman
it.
Pusley?
Okay, thank you. All right. Sorry, it's a little bulky today.
You ready for me, Rebecca?
Yes, sir, you ready?
Aye.
Thank you.
You're not allowed to vote, Roland.
Okay, so 7-2.
Okay, the motion carries. Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and then we're going to start our workshop on water and wastewater. So this meeting is now adjourned.
Thought you didn't want to add any more debt to our books.
All right, so 1 down. No public comment.
Yeah, that's a little bit better vote. It's a good vote.
I got it.
Whatever you want, President. We'll put that in your schedule.
I think you guys have more money in your